Year 1945, the year infamous for a variety of reasons, with the droppage of Little Boy and the Fat Man on the unlucky cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The whole Asia Pacific was left in chaos. The death toll of 2 lakh completely shook Japan and led to the independence of Korea and China from the Japanese rule. Prior to the division of Korea in 1945, the Korean peninsula was under Japanese colonial rule from 1910 to 1945. During this time, the Japanese government enforced policies to assimilate Koreans into Japanese culture and language while exploiting Korean resources and labor. This led to the growing sense of Korean nationalism and anti-colonial sentiment. In 1945, at the end of World War II, Japan surrendered and the Korean peninsula was liberated from the colonial rule. The Soviet Union and the United States agreed to divide Korea at the 38th parallel, with the Soviet Union occupying the north and United States occupying the south. This led to two completely opposite mindsets sharing the border, the communist north and the democratic south. The division was intended to be temporary, but ultimately led to the creation of two separate and distinct countries. This division of North Korea and South Korea is a significant event in the history of Korean Peninsula. It has had far-reaching implications for both countries and the world. In 1948, North Korea became a communist country under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, a former guerrilla fighter who had fought against Japanese during the war, while South Korea became a democratic country under the leadership of Syngman-rhee, a staunch anti-communist who had spent many years in exile. This division of Korea led to a war between North and South Korea that lasted from 1950 to 1953. This war is often referred to as Korean War in the history of books. It is considered as one of the defining conflicts of Cold War. It was a conflict that pitted North Korea, which was backed by Soviet Union and China, against South Korea, which was supported by the United States and a number of other Western countries. The war was a bloody and brutal affair that claimed the lives of millions of people and left the Korean peninsula divided to this day. The war began on June 25, 1950, when North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel, which has been established as a boundary between the two Koreas after the World War II. The North Koreans quickly overran much of South Korea, and by August, they had captured the capital Seoul. The United States and its allies were quick to respond to the North Korean aggression. Under the auspices of United Nations, a coalition of countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, dispatched troops to Korea. The American General MacArthur was put in charge of coalition forces. The tide of the war began to turn in September 1950 when UN forces launched a daring amphibious landing at Incheon near Seoul. The landing caught the North Koreans by surprise and the UN forces were able to quickly retake the city. By October, UN forces had pushed the North Koreans back across the 38th parallel and had regained control much of South Korea. But the situation changed dramatically in late November 1950 when China intervened in the war. China, which had long been a supporter of North Korea, sent hundreds of thousands of troops across the border into the Korea. The Chinese intervention caught the UN forces off guard and they were quickly pushed back to the 38th parallel. The war then settled into a bloody stalemate that lasted for next 2.5 years. The both sides dug in and the fighting was brutal and often hand-to-hand. The UN forces, led by MacArthur, who advocated for more aggressive strategy, including the use of nuclear weapons. However, President Truman, wary of wider war with China and the Soviet Union, dismissed MacArthur in April of 1951. After years of negotiations, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. The armistice established a demilitarized zone (DMZ) that runs along the 38th parallel, effectively dividing the Korean peninsula into the two. The armistice also established a joint military commission to oversee the implementation of the agreement. The legacy of the Korean War is still felt today, as DMZ remains one of the most heavily fortified borders in the world, and the tensions between North and South Korea continue to simmer. The war ended in ceasefire, but no peace treaty was signed, and the two countries remain technically at war to this date. In today's world, North Korea has been isolated from the international community and has suffered from economic sanctions due to its nuclear weapon programs and human rights abuses. Now, it is left with an economy which has been struggling for decades. South Korea, on the other hand, has become one of the most prosperous countries in the world and has developed into a democracy with a strong economy and vibrant culture. With the completely opposite lives across the borders, it can be termed as hell and heaven sharing a border. With this, we bring you to the end of this episode. We will soon be back with another episode. Till then, like and drop a subscribe.